Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. Well, I suppose we can start now. Good evening, everybody, from a rainy day here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. It's just past 7 p.m. and I'm delighted to be hosting tonight's guest. A couple of housekeeping notes before we start today's talk is you've got a chat option that's available. Please make sure that you state your name clearly and also your affiliation. Some of you have been messaging me privately. I am not sure if that is because you want your names to be anonymous or if you are doing so by mistake. But if you'd like your comments to be available to everybody, make sure you choose the message everyone option. Just a quick reminder, I host these talks twice a week. On Wednesdays, like today, the talks are exclusively about art. And on Saturdays, the talks are about social, maybe economic issues. Last week, we had Dr. Ziad Dawood, whose talk is available on Saturday. Next Saturday, we have a speaker who will come and talk about the role of technology in the pandemic. What is the role of technology in the pandemic? We have someone senior here from Dubai who will be speaking, and I will share the poster tomorrow. I just need to find my guest speaker here so I can unmute him. Okay, so I'll be sharing my screen. Once again, it gives me great pleasure to be welcoming our speaker today. There we go. Share screen. Okay, there we go. So I'll be introducing our speaker in a second. So our speaker actually is not too far from us here in the UAE. He's in Bahrain. Abdul Rahim Sharif is an old friend of mine. I've known him for about maybe close to 12 or 13 years. Abdul Rahim Sharif was born in Bahrain in 1954. He studied in Paris at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts, so the National High Art School in Paris in the 1970s, before going on to New York, where he obtained a master's in fine arts degree from Parsons School of Design. Abdul Rahim Sharif is one of the most prominent artists from the Gulf. In fact, I would like to read to you a short introduction that was written about him by an important art critic, an art historian, Dr. Maha Sultan, who is a critic and professor at the Institute of Fine Arts at the Lebanese University. So she says about Abdul Rahim Sharif, he's a master of his artistic domain. Abdul Rahim Sharif portrays a potent skill when handling his visual instruments, so deeply infused by a lustful and boundaries-free world of manipulative passion in discovering a new chemistry amongst colors. So who is Abdul Rahim Sharif? He is an artist that I very much admire. I am unmuting him now, and without further ado, let me just make sure that you can all see him. Okay. Abdul Rahim Sharif, yes. Oh, I see your questions are already coming in. Oh boy, here we go. Saad Abdul Rahim, are you there? Can you unmute your mic?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Tfadal, Saad Abdul Rahim.
Can you please correct that image, Sultan? Because
yes, I'll do that right away now. I'm just spotlighting you. Saad
okay.
Abdul Rahim Sharif, this work dates back 50 years. So this is, even despite you being very young, your career has this year passed 50 years exactly. This is the 50th anniversary of the beginning of your career. This canvas going back to 1970, the beginning of your career, it looks like it's inspired by Gulf art. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Actually, first, hello to everybody.
Hello.
This painting, which I did at that time that there was really village space in Bahrain. And this is the first painting that I did outdoor. Of course, before this, there are some works that I did because I started painting when I was 9 years old. But this painting, you know, a lot of like failures and little success. But then this painting, which dates 1970, was the experience of carrying material outside, where a lot of villagers were following me, and I asked the girl if she could stand in front of me. So this painting, which I titled it Villager with Bukhnag. Bukhnag is, you know, the black thing she wears that covers the head to sort of the starting of the arm. Usually they have golden ornament in the middle. So, you know, this is one of the paintings of those years where I was like some 15, 16 years old. Yes.
Abdul Rahim, we see that in this work, the theme of the Gulf scenes continues with you. Can you tell us more about this?
You know, in 1970, just after I did that painting, unfortunately, my father died. And I had to sort of quit painting because there was no time for it, and because I wanted to make my, you know, earn a living for my family. And I quit paintings for about 3 years, where I created, I'm one of the first people who created rock bands in Bahrain because I play keyboard as well. It started with accordion. Then in 73, where things were financially settled for my family, I went back to sort of warm up and thinking of again, because my dream was lost when my father died. And this painting, which I did out of a shop that sold secondhand musical instrument, this painting was done after a sketch with pencil and then developed in a painting at home in 1973, just a year before going to Paris.
Okay, so yeah, I have to unmute myself.
I must say that I lost my father after this painting. During that time, I used to do a lot of work. Now, from here to 74, I must correct this. You know, I beg your pardon. From here to 73, yeah, correct. This painting was done to 73, which is just before going to Paris. Yes, yes.
Saad Abdul Rahim, you got a, I think you got a scholarship, was it, that you went to Paris? Because we see there's an interesting shift. The previous work had a lot of color, and now we're going into some kind of black and white, some kind of focus on the human body. Can you tell us more about your journey to Paris as a Gulf citizen, someone from Bahrain?
I must say, you know, going to Paris or getting an opportunity to go to Paris, and I managed to get a scholarship from the French government. Not much money, you know, to make it to enable me to paint. And many people, this is not my work.
No worries. I'm going back to it. Go ahead.
Many people who think or say that I learned painting in Paris. In fact, I learned, I was working in Paris with a sculptor, Marcel Gilly, who was a second generation of famous Auguste Rodin, and I'm very proud to be a third generation of famous French sculptor, Auguste Rodin. And this particular drawing, I went in 1976 in a drawing competition called Grand Mas des Beaux-Arts, which was over all the School of Art in France. And this drawing won the Grand Award, which the French government kindly doubled my scholarship, but it still wasn't enough money for painting. I carried on almost 4 or 5 years in Paris doing pencil drawings. I had 2 more awards also of Pierre David Veil, which at that time was exhibition award. But this one in particular, which is still one of the awards I'm very proud of, scoring an award at the age almost 20. This is a figure in motion. I used to do, I must say the timing I had in this work. This is really a drawing that didn't take more than 3 minutes.
Wow.
One of the reasons I'm very proud of it, because time factor is not really an issue in a work of art. Of course, later I became someone who spent so much time on the painting. Yeah.
Ustad Abdul Rahim, first of all, I apologize. There's a red line on the screen and I have no idea how to erase it. It might be something to do with annotation.
Because one of the theses I did when I went to New York, it was the behavior of natural light, which is concrete light, and abstract space. And actually, during that time, I'm very sorry that these drawings were not available to take photographs of them. I used to mix color with black and white, even though I had a lot of problem to shift to painting.
Okay, so we're going to go over a few images now quickly from the Paris time. This is an image of you on a motorbike. This looks like it's in the Place de l'Opéra. I'm not sure where in Paris. Do you remember where this was?
This is at the court of École de Beaux-Arts. I had a friend who had motorbike. Most of the French people who live out of Paris, they have motorbikes because it's easier to get to Paris. At that age, we were curious to drive a motorbike. But I remember the first time I sat on a motorbike, I was about 14 years old, and it turned over me, waiting for the bakery to give me my bread.
So we're going to go to the next one. Here we go. So this is quite a controversial image, Ustad Abdul Rahim. What are the circumstances of this photo?
Painting is me in a bathtub, which later developed for series of bathtub, which I will explain later. The bathtubs for me had a lot of stories, whether it's good or sad, but this photograph is really the beginning of series of bathtubs, which I did many years later.
Yeah, I mean, this is when I first encountered your work, I saw the theme of bathtubs. But do you remember who took this photo?
You're gonna make my wife divorce me.
Okay, no more questions, enough said. Okay, so, and here we see Ustad Abdul Rahim Sharif with his professor at the École des Beaux-Arts, Marcel Gilly. He's the one on the left, am I right?
Marcel is the creator. He was, I proudly say, was my professor. He was the founder of Salon de Mai in France. But I must say here, maybe the first and the last lesson he gave me, valid until today. Well,
what happened? See, this is what I tried to do. Clear all drawings. Ustad Abdul Rahim? What's happening? Okay. Can you guys see me? Can you guys hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Yeah. So I don't know what happened, but let's see where he is. Sorry about technical difficulties. The internet isn't really the Gulf's forte. Ustad Abdul Rahim, is he here? So we will continue maybe to the next slide until I find Ustad Abdul Rahim maybe is signing in again. So this was his professor at École des Beaux-Arts. When Ustad Abdul Rahim finished for his Paris period, he moved to New York, which is the image that you see now. In New York, as you can see, he has moved into a completely different stage. And oh, let's find him. I think he's here. Ustad Abdul Rahim. I am sorry about this technical problem. So he's moved into a completely different stage, which is a complete abstraction of his work. And as soon as I can locate where he is, sorry folks, this is totally my fault. How do I find the participant once again? Participants, oh, there we go. There we go. Ustad Abdul Rahim, are you back?
I'm here.
Yalla. Okay, tell us about New York, Ustad Abdul Rahim.
I just want to finish one sentence about Marcel Gilly.
Yes,
when
sir.
he my work and he, I told him I want to be an artist, and I pointed with my pencil on my page, making a dot, and I told him I came here to be an artist, and he answered, if you came to this school to be an artist, you have come to a wrong address. But this was very important lesson for my life, and pointed at the dot I did on the page, and he said, but if you want to be an artist, you have to know where to put this dot on your page. And that thing for me is a lifetime lesson. Yes, go to New York.
Okay, so in New York, Ustad Abdul Rahim, we see that you have moved a bit towards abstraction. This is the period of the late 1970s, early 80s, when you were at the Parsons. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you see it abstract, but actually it's a figure bending on a glass table with a plant at the back.
But there's more geometry.
Yeah, I must say I had a lot of difficulties in New York, shifting from black and white pencil that I worked for 5 years in Paris to color. And then, I really have a lot of mess. I made color on paper. This is one of the successful work that came out at really, in the second year, actually, 1980, when I was in New York.
Can you tell us where your studio was in New York?
It was in a mezzanine underground where there was a little window on the top. I could see the feet of the people, their legs when they walk. And I counted 100% on artificial light. Then I became so sensible to these things. I went for a long time in Bahrain working on natural light. But that's it. This is a pose in that studio.
Ustad Abdul Rahim, where are the paintings from this period? Do you still keep them, or are they sold somewhere?
I will frankly say there was a lot of them was missed, but one beautiful work that I could not photograph, I did it at the third year, actually after graduation, which I titled them. You see, I moved from Manhattan to Queens in third year. And I made a mural of 9 meter width with about 1.5 meter high, which unfortunately, or I tell you the truth, is still rolled in my portfolio that I brought from New York. I never opened it again. That one, I titled it, The True Story of the Princess Queensboro Bridge, which was the link for me and a lot of immigrants who came with big dreams to live and work in America. I made this big mural, trying to be in the personality of every different person who took the subway at that bridge. Yes.
Ustad Abdul Rahim, maybe before I ask you, this is a reminder to all our viewers, please write your questions down in the chat box. Ustad Abdul Rahim, this is quite a peculiar image. You are an artist, and here we see you with a famous politician in the US. I'm not sure if you'd like to tell us who this is and what are the circumstances of this image.
That's Henry Kissinger. You know, I met the Satan once in my life. And I was selected in an international house where I live. There were about 85 different nationalities. And I was selected with 6 other people representing different parts of the world to be guests at University Club in New York in their annual dinner. And I met Henry Kissinger at this meeting, and actually he was sitting, I was honored to sit with a lot of important finance people, and Kissinger was among them.
And okay, well, I want to ask you about about your impression of him. I think you referred to him as Satan.
Well, everybody knows the story of the political history.
Okay.
At that time, I think he used to give lectures and flying to different cities, giving lecture university. But I'll tell you one thing, I admired very much his voice. It's very characteristic voice, you know, very.
At least there's one good thing we can say. Okay, so we'll go to the next image now. So here, Ustad Abdul Rahim, you go back to Bahrain, and we see you going back to the depiction of the souk. But this time it's very different because you went through your figuration stage, you went through the abstraction stage, and now you come back to Bahrain and you've almost abstracted the souk. Tell us a little bit about this movement.
If you noticed, Sultan, the big planes, they still relate to the previous green painting I did in New York. But I must say, when I came back to Bahrain, the contemporary art scene was semi-dead, if not dead 100%. And I found myself like responsible to create a platform of communication. At that time, I was close to a lot of expats who bought a lot of my work. I developed an old scene of souks and villages and villager life, but with coloristic input. This painting represents that period. But during this time, I happened to have health crisis, and I sort of like, I had to say, I must say I managed to create a good group of people painting, especially the ladies. And then when I got this health crisis, I moved to another thing, which I call it becoming more serious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of those paintings was sold in Christie's, which I called it The Battle, which was exactly the painting that I did after putting all these, let's call it traditional scenes. Yeah. It still exists in Bahrain. And I did this battle scene, which was sold in Christie's. And then after that, things started developing. If you look how this picture is composed, is actually different forms and colors. This is how, as I used to sell most of my work, people ask me why I didn't do a solo. Mm-hmm. Coming out from the sort of semi-abstracted souk scene, mm-hmm. I made my first solo in Bahrain. I titled it Kingdom of Behavior.
Which is the work we have now on the screen.
Yeah. Kingdom of Behavior was really getting together organic form, which is the yellow ochre side of the picture, and a geometrical side, which is the left side of the picture. And the challenge was to make it work. I went through these kind of thing, and then I went through making diptychs and triptychs of different kind of work. You put them together, they become one unit. So the challenge was in there. Going through Kingdom of Behavior, that gave me a sort of freedom to do different composition of work.
Yeah. Ustad Abdul Rahim, in this image now we see a work titled Princess. The 1990s was a very instrumental time in the Gulf states, you saw increase in commercialization, you see everything started to become available for sale. And I feel like there's some kind of connection here where you start using, you start bringing back figuration, but this work also looks like it is some kind of collage. And are you talking about anyone here when you say princess?
I'll tell you what, no, number one, I like to make it look like collage, but it is not a collage. I want sort of, still sometimes it comes in my work, I like to make the borders like if they were cut with scissor. And it's very challenging because it gives different mood and different character and space-time to the picture. But what's going around Princess, at that time, many, I mean, I'm not racist, but I'll put it that way. Many poor people suddenly became rich. And this proverb or expression, nouveau riche, as the French call it, which is, you know, the newly rich, you know, things of, especially the outlook, started to change in Bahrain. When I titled a number of painting Princess, I was really aiming to represent those nouveau riche.
We have a question, Abdul Rahim, from Fawaz Khalid, who asks, he's a concept designer, and he asks, what was the inspiration behind this princess painting? Was there a specific incident?
Actually, I went to Kuwait and I saw this, I don't know if she was Kuwaiti or Bahraini, in the middle of summer, and she had all the furs around her, you know, in the middle of summer. So my God, does money does that? You know, and this is where it triggered the princess.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here I feel like I'd like to once again bring back a quote from Dr. Maha Sultan, who says about your work in her introduction to your exhibition, Edge. She says, the man with the hat suddenly appears in a bathtub. Maybe Sharif is attempting to bridge the gap between private and public, intimate and distant, ego and alter ego. You bring this man, you introduce by the late 90s a man in a hat, and then introduce the theme of the bathtub once again. So I'd like maybe to ask you to explain the ideas of this portraiture. Who are these people? Why are you painting Al Capone?
Since my childhood, I admired gangster, American old black and white gangster film. And I was very much still a fan of, you know, the mafia films. But there is a character in particular, Humphrey Bogart. I love this man. I remember the door of my room in New York, when you opened it inside, there was Humphrey Bogart standing with a hat at the size of the door. You know, it was like my friend living with me. The idea of the hat and cigar, then series of gangsters I did, which I think quite a number of artists did that after that, comes really from my, you know, my love to Humphrey Bogart, you know, James Cagney, those days. And it was again taken with Godfather and all that, but my love was, you know, early films, black and white.
Yeah, and this is the series that Maha Sultan also refers to, the man in the hat and the bathtub. Again, bathtub, we see you bringing in some abstraction and also some figuration as well. Would you like to tell us about this work?
This painting is probably the first bathtub that appeared on my canvas. You remember the early story I told you, my photograph in France? This painting, even though it looks so simple, between demolishing and rebuilding, it took about 2 years. But with this, I had developed things, which was, I titled my second show in 1999, Pulse. Then in 2000, I made a third major show, which I called it Entity. I started to be more curious about what brings me an art, what makes me love art, all these questions. And the answer was immortality. Now, somewhere between immortality, I had to find, it's not a recipe or ingredients that you can put it in a painting. You have to find out. And here I like to say something, especially if there is any young artist watching this. Many artists, when they are young, they tell them, they don't like to talk or write a text about their work. And frankly, I encourage them. I encourage them because text can be parallel and help their creativity. When I started to find the vocabulary of why I came into painting, and I found the answer is frankly the immortality of the work, and this immortality needed to have a behavior and a pulse and an entity, different elements started to come in my work. And maybe we don't have the series of the bathtubs. I started to paint bathtub with telephones in them, shoes on them, vases in them. And the aim was the immortality of the image in a sort of, it becomes an icon where you remember the image.
Okay, thank you so much. This is also one of my favorite series. I think this is the personal take, although the Bushido's Japanese heritage and tradition, but I think you've managed to install yourself in this work. Is this right?
This is a little bit my attitude against corruption. I imagine myself that I am a Bushido. I'm chopping the heads of all these people doing corruptions in our societies, and a little bit everywhere. Corruption is everywhere. So this picture, me in the middle with a sword with two figures without heads, is me chopping the heads of the bad guys who are making corruption.
Okay, I want to ask you who they are. Now, this is a work that we've purchased at Barjil 10 years ago, and I've never asked you what this work is about. I just fell in love with the composition, but I actually have no idea why I love this work. Could you tell us more about it? It's titled Artist and the Model.
The best love is the love that comes without reason, and that's the crazy love. Now, coming back to this painting, is as I said earlier, working with different elements. During if you remember, I titled this show, "Who Says It Doesn't Work?" In other words, I took the freedom of putting something classic next to something out of this world, a wrong proportion, mixing animals with human beings. And you can see on the left side is me from the back in front of an easel, which you can see the red painting at your front. But then the figure, which is a blend of child movement into animal anatomy, out of proportion. And I think the beauty of this picture is putting all that together.
Okay, so going to the next one. So now we have a special treat for everybody. Are you guys ready? And you'll have to excuse me with my technical limitations, but I'd like to introduce you in this image to a guest speaker, but he sent us a recording, which I will play for you. It's only a couple of minutes long. And this gentleman is one of the most prominent collectors in the region. His name is Abdul Breish. And he sent us a recording because he is probably the greatest collector of the works of Ustad Abdul Rahim Sharif. And he will tell us about his works and specifically about a work which I will be showing you in the next slide. But excuse me once again, I know this is not your work, Ustad Abdul Rahim, but I am only minimizing the image so I can play to you the recording of Ustad Abdul Breish. You guys are ready for this? This is quite a treat. I'm very happy to be doing this.
I've known Abdul Rahim Sharif since 1984, when I was based in Bahrain working for a bank there. I was living in a compound of villas with American and English neighbors who were very good friends of Abdul Rahim and who bought a few of his paintings. One day when he was visiting them showing some of his artwork, I saw one of the paintings and I bought it immediately. That was the first painting I have ever bought. I came back to Bahrain in 2003, some 19 years later, after I first met Abdul Rahim. We immediately reconnected, and soon after that, I often spent Fridays or Saturdays in the afternoon at his studio discussing art. That was when I bought from him a couple of paintings, one of which was a man with the hat, the subject matter of this interview. The minute I saw it on the wall, I knew I needed to have it. I was mesmerized by the composition, something that Abdul Rahim excelled in. The coloring, the largesse of the painting, giving it space to breathe, the line dividing the painting into two, which was perfectly placed, and the large area to the left with the shadows of the painting that gave a lot of perspective to the whole piece and balance to the artwork, which was magnificently articulated. I regard Abdul Rahim Sharif by far the best artist and colorist in the Gulf. I would even venture to say he is there as a rising star amongst the best if you consider the contemporary artists from the Arab world. Nevertheless, despite his exposure to the West, where he lived in New York and Paris in his early formative years, and speaks both English and French eloquently, the problem facing Abdul Rahim is that he is living in a region that does not or cannot fully comprehend or appreciate his artwork. The region lacks the collectors, patrons, and liquidity that Western capitals provide. He's also not well represented as an international artist. Bahrain is a very small place. I strongly believe he would accumulate a tremendous amount of support and audience if he were living in, say, New York, London, or even Paris. I personally intend to buy more of his recent work in due course and would have liked to buy a lot more from his last two exhibitions, which are probably the best artwork he's ever produced.
Saad Abdul Rahim, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
So, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sultan.
So again, that was a high praise from Abdul Majid Braish, one of the most prominent collectors from the Middle East and North Africa, who's also collected your work heavily. And he also praises your very last exhibition from which these last two works came from. But my question is going to be about this specific work, which I would like to ask you more about. This work is titled Angel. It looks abstracted, but it's also very much Middle Eastern related. Can you tell us a little bit about Angel?
I'll come a little bit to the tools, which is, after so many years' work, especially there is a portion that I didn't say it, which was when I was a teenager, I used to copy masters like Rembrandt and Velasquez. You come to a certain age that you would like to do some lining, and if it tells you it's a figure or it's an animal, then so be it. I was watching news of unfortunate crisis in the Arab world, which I think is a total result of the forbidden of religion and the forbidden of politics, which brought this region, Arab and the Islamic world, to a total drama and disaster. And I was watching TV as I really update myself on what's happening in the world. And this boy was coming out of a bombing, God knows, how he came out of it. And, so I remembered the sort of this no mercy on these children or any other religion or nationality. It reminded me that, the wings are actually two pieces of lamb. It reminded me the sacrifice that was made when God wanted to experience Abraham to sacrifice his son, and at the last minute he sent him a sheep, and it's mentioned in Quran. So I remembered, if God had a mercy on Abraham, why these people don't have a mercy on this child? So I put the lambs of Abraham and put them on the shoulders of this sort of fast-done child, and it became an angel. And I said, well, maybe this child doesn't belong anymore to this world, that he has to go up. And that's the story behind this picture.
Okay, thank you so much. Going to the next work now. This is a work, once again, also that's very, very personal. It's a piece in which you bring together the portrait and the bathtub. And I'd like you maybe to say a couple of words before I try to bring someone else in.
You like to say, or shall I say something?
Yeah, you can speak. Yes, yes.
Well, I don't want to dramatize that, but I lost my daughter, who was fighting for her life for 5 years, and since I did some of bathtubs with faces in them, it's like me getting drained in the water. But then at the end, it comes a painting. No matter what, as Pierre Bonnard said, no matter what is the subject or the motivation, they all go under a layer called painting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to find Abdul Qadri, but I can't seem to find him here. I'd like to go to this series. This is an exclusive, everybody. This is a very, very special treat. This work has never been seen before. You are the very first group of people to be seeing these works. And these works are titled The River of Sin. And I'd like to invite Ustad Abdul Rahim to talk about this work, please.
Following the disaster situation happening in the Islamic world, and also thinking of the day before judgment, I had a feeling like the way things goes is like politics wants us to race to reach that day. This is the first major large work I did after a few small ones, 3 or 2 small ones, where I had to decide if the figures have to communicate and have a dialogue between them, or they should be an heritage of human position through time. And at the end, which is the painting will come after this, I came to a conclusion that after all, painting is a game and it finds its own language and rules. And then the painting decided how the figures should be, what you're gonna see at certain stage, how it came. Of course, between this painting and the coming one, there is a lot of work, large work, that for the reasons of time, I couldn't put them.
I think I'd like to invite Abid. Would you please say a few things? So Abid Al-Qadri is a friend of ours. He is a prominent curator first, but also an artist as well. And he is very knowledgeable about the work of Ustad Abdul Rahim. So I'll put the spotlight on you.
Hi, Sultan. How are you? Hi, Abdul Rahim. I'm so happy to be part of this. Thank you, Sultan, for inviting me. Thank you, Abdul Rahim. I think, beside being a curator or a publisher now, I can deeply relate with Abdul Rahim Sharif's work because we share the same practice. He, as a prolific painter, and I know exactly what are the challenges today to be a painter and yet to be considered as a contemporary artist. But I would like to talk about my experience in Kuwait for 9 years as a director and for contemporary art platform, and also as an art critic at the beginning. I think the biggest challenge for me was actually to find a painter, a good painter, in the Gulf. There was kind of disconnection. There's a gap between the generation of artists who started practicing painting and sculpting and the other generation who started producing contemporary work from other generation. I think at that time, or I thought at that time, that painting was never developed as successfully as other contemporary practices. And this is where Abdul Rahim stands apart. He was from the beginning an artist who really challenged his context. And this all became clear to me during my first visit to his studio, when he showed me in his house a collection of pencils drawings that they had amazing and so much freedom in those sketches. The simplicity of the graphite against the paper, that drawing were sensitive yet amazingly full of tension. From this series, then we moved to another series, which I had already been familiar with, the older portraits, such as the Al Capone. And when I saw those auto-portraits that he did, I felt that those, they kind of, they are kind of representation of himself, how he became the foreigner, the stranger, attempting to find his own image in his cultural context. I consider these portraits the first to challenge the traditional image of the Bahraini Arab artist.
Thank you so much.
Really, and again, but the surprise actually was today the image that you showed him in the bathtub. I think this was the biggest surprise. Abdul Rahim, you didn't show me this image, never. And I think this made everything now makes sense, like his other series, the bathtub, the river of sin. I think I'm struck by this photograph, and I think how in which he tackled these themes of body and nudity continue to bring a sensitivity and intimacy to his work. I think him as an artist, he translates these questions actually of representation into discussion on the most complex social and political issues of our time. And
thank you so much, Abdul.
I know I have 1 minute to talk, or 1 minute and a half.
Thank you so much.
There's a lot to say about Abdul Rahim.
No, we have so much to say, but thank you so much, and thank you for joining us.
I just want to manage to absorb the art history is quite impressive, and he really managed very well to be very flexible, very free in how he presents himself and how he presents his canvases. Thank you again.
So much. Thank you. Ustad Abdul Rahim, I'm going to ask you a question. This work has a lot of nudity. As an artist from the Gulf, did you shy from depicting such nudity? Were you ever told off? Has anyone ever criticized you for doing works that are nude?
Number one, I don't do this to provoke any sensual or erotic thing. I have a lot of small work with, which ready for the next show. There are a lot of nudes in them, and the society in Bahrain easily accepts this. I think an artist should be free when his work, and should the society don't accept, then the battle is there. The battle of making them accept it.
Who do you mean here? What kind of scene are you depicting in the River of Sin?
I don't get you. Do you mean what picture, or?
What is the scene? What is this River of Sin? Are you talking about the Gulf? Are you talking about Bahrain? Are you talking about human beings in general?
Sultan, connecting it to the disaster happening to the Arab world and the spring of what is called the Arab Spring.
Yes.
This came as even though I am not board member of neither Hell or Paradise, but I thought of sort of connecting what's happening to the day before judgment, as I said earlier. And these paintings, which came to different sessions, like, River of Sin and Jungle, River of Sin Tsunami, River of Sin Persian Carpet. The one who's going to come now after this, if I remember well, is the situation. Yeah. Now this picture really, the figures, as I said earlier, the painting decides its own game. And the figures became so little like insects, and it started to look a shape of a Nayin Persian carpet, which is a mix of wool and silk. And here I want to say, the more people, step on the Persian carpet, the more it dwarfs. And this is a little bit the situation in the Islamic and Arab world. The more we have crisis is the benefit of others.
That's a good point. Ustad Abdul Rahim, we only have 10 minutes to go, so I'll take some questions from the chat. We have a question from Khawla Al-Marzougi, who is a visual art student at Zayed University, and she's asking Mr. Abdul Rahim, do you feel that your controversial and political work affected your career negatively in the Gulf?
You know, it's like always, you have people who stands with you and people who hate you, and you can't become a composition that people like. You are what you are. But I remember a friend of mine, unfortunately, he died a long time ago. He said, if we want to correct you, you will no longer be Rahim Sharif. So, yeah, some people are very negative with me. Some people are very positive. They start with me, but it became a way of living now.
Said Abdul Rahim, we have a question from Susie Sikorsky, who is a specialist at Christie's and researcher also on Arab art. She wrote her thesis on UAE art history. Her question is, how connected were you with other artists practicing in the Gulf?
I have a group of artists that we see each other occasionally. If there is an art fair or that, sometimes they come to Bahrain, they call me, but I am really someone who goes to the studio before sunrise, and I don't sleep at night, to tell you the truth. I am most of the time in the studio, and socially maybe I'm not that much compared to what I was when I was much younger.
Said Abdul Rahim, we have a question from Rami Rabaya, who is in New York, and he asks, why do you paint on 2 canvases instead of 1 canvas?
Good question. One is, sometimes you'll work on something and it wants you to do something bigger, and you don't have that canvas. I'd say, frankly, we have a problem in Bahrain with the carpenters to make you a good straight stretcher that doesn't work. Wood is a problem in this part of the world because it's hot and it dries quickly, then it works. So if I have 2 canvases that I can match together, I put them together. It's part of the picture, sometimes I choose that separation. It becomes like you move from a mood to another mood, it doesn't disturb me at all.
Said Abdul Rahim, we have a question from Sophie Kazan, who says, thank you so much for sharing your art journey with us. Do you feel your career would have been different if you were an art student now? And what do you think about the way that art is taught and art is practiced today in Bahrain?
In Bahrain?
And wherever.
I'll tell you what, there is right now this art mania in Bahrain. Everybody's becoming this, which is, socially is good. That I consider it's a positive, art makes positive people. Sorry, can you tell me the beginning of the question again?
Do you feel your career would have been different if you were an art student today? And what do you think of the art practice?
I'll tell you what, one of my dreams is to be young again with the experience I have today. And I'll tell you what, I say, wow, it took time when you go to and look at the mirror, see all your hair got white. I say, wow, can I be reborn again? Yes, painting is something lovely, and I wish I could go back and be, 20 or 30 years old. It would be lovely to continue paint. This is why at my heart surgery, I thought I'm never going to come back home, my open heart surgery 2 years back. And when I came out, I said, thank God I am reborn for painting. I am a paintaholic, and a simple one.
We have a Joy Glidden who shared a quote, which I don't necessarily agree with, saying youth is wasted on the young. So we have a question from Latif Al-Khayyat saying, what's your opinion on the current Bahraini art scene?
Well, I'll talk to you very frankly. I think Bahraini art scene was much better some 20 years back. But then, and for those who came into the art, they are not looking at it creatively. And, on the creation side, maybe it's a little bit everywhere is like that. People came into art for commercial reason. and they are looking for the ingredients and the formula how to make a painting to sell. And that's very sad. Bahrain, frankly, is in that situation.
We have a question from Mohammed Aslawi from Kuwait, who says, do you have any plans on publishing a book which has all your art and your personal photos?
Salam, you brought up a very good sensitive thing. I would love to see anybody who would like to do that. Yes, I do have a plan. You know, the problem is how big will be that book? Maybe we have to do like different volumes.
Okay, so this is an invitation to
a catalog on me or a book, I don't mind.
It's an invitation to people who are interested in publishing a book on the work of Abdul Rahim Sharif. We also have a couple of young Bahraini artists who are saying that they're going to try to do something about that to try and improve, and they are improving the art scene. I think maybe the penultimate question I'd like to ask you from Khawla, but also seconded by Naila and some others who are asking, what advice can you give an emerging Arab artist?
I think I can put it, as I'm a painter and there is a lot of things happening in the world, I don't like to say I am anti this and anti that, because sometimes there is a beautiful installation, for instance, and there is a lousy one. I can say one sentence that is really the cream of years of work. It's not what you do, it's how you do.
Okay. We have a question which you don't necessarily have to answer, but it's from Lisa Boleshger, who asks, how do you see the current situation impacting the contemporary art scene in the Gulf?
It will see some of the things can react immediately, but some of the thing is like a baby in the womb of the mother. It takes time to make up.
Okay. So maybe the last question is, I'll go back to this because it really is the theme of the show, of this interview. A question I got is, how come you didn't show the river of sin publicly until now?
I didn't. Your voice was not clear. Repeat.
How come you haven't? The question is, why haven't you shown the river of sin until now publicly?
I still work on that. I still produce new images on this. I think many artists have 2 or 3 different kinds of work, frankly. I remember once, you know, my teacher in New York showed a painting and I said, you know, what is this? He said, Rahim, I have so many of those, don't tell anybody. You know, there is always, any artist will try. And one of the reasons that I kept on trying new things, frankly, is because you are not put in a network immediately. And that can be positive and negative. Negative, that you will be stuck with galleries doing the same thing and becomes boring at certain stage. And positive is your work will flourish all the time because you are free and you are not dictated to do a certain kind of work.
Ustad Abdul Rahim Sharif, it's a great honor to have hosted you on the online cultural Majlis today. I am a big fan of your work. I'm a big fan of your personality. I also want to say a shout out to Abdul Rahim Sharif's son, Hisham Sharif, who's also a rising star in art, someone I've come to know recently, and without whom this presentation would have had even more technical difficulties. So it's always nice to have someone very young to come and smoothen these hiccups. So thank you once again, everybody, for joining us. And I hope I see you once again on Saturday and next Wednesday, where we have an interesting speaker coming up, maybe a youth roundtable. All the best. Thank you, Ustad Abdul Rahim. Thank you, Hisham. Thank you, Ustad Abdul Majid and Abid and everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Salam.